Welcome, everybody. It's Craig from the University of Applied Research and Development. I'm delighted that we're here today for another installment of our Veteran Stories, Difference Makers. And we've got Ray Gaster with us. Hi, Ray.
Good morning. How are you doing?
Great to have you with us. I really appreciate you giving your
Good to be
time.
here.
You're a veteran, you're a business person, and I think you've got a lot to share with us today. So why don't you first of all tell us about your time in the military, and thank you for your service. And I'd love to hear your story about how you came to be in the military and what your service was like.
Well, how I came, I got a notice from Uncle Sam that said he wanted me. So that was an easy choice, so to speak.
Right.
I was going to school at nights, and I had a couple of deferments. This was back in 1966, which is last century. So that's been a while ago. And so they weren't, I think at that point, you had to carry an ungodly amount. You had to be married, and probably had a kid, and then you could get out of the draft. I was single. And so I went into the service, into the U.S. Army. And, and during basic, I went ahead and I applied for OCS and went to OCS, became it was about a year and a day from when I was drafted. I got my commission as a second lieutenant in the infantry. And while I was in there going through OCS, Officer Candidate School, I applied for flight school. A lot of those guys in my company, in my OCS company, most of them were gung-ho. They wanted to be airborne ranger. And I thought I didn't want to jump out of a helicopter and aircraft. I'd rather fly the thing. So I applied for it. And after probably about 6 months of ground duty here in the States, working with troops, preparing them to go to Vietnam, I got orders to go to flight school. And that was my first trip to Texas. And it's a great state, I want to tell you that. I really enjoyed it. We were out at Mineral Wells and went through flight school in the first phase. And then the second phase brought me over to Hunter Army Airfield here in Savannah, Georgia. That's how I got established here in Savannah. And finished up here. I met my first wife here and got married and had a couple kids. And well, I finished school. I was only in the service a little over 5.5 years. When I got out, I was a captain, infantry. Back in those days, they didn't have an aviation. I went to Vietnam, and while in Vietnam, I served with the 1st Air Cav, and I flew Chinook helicopters, the CH-47s, which were basically a truck driver in the sky. We were hauling what we call ash and trash, going on out and supporting all the fire bases out in the remote areas. We were their lifeline because there weren't any roads or anything. So flew a lot of hours, earned 32 air medals for the hours that I flew and missions that I took and everything. So it was a good accomplishment. And come back home, I was, as I say, I came home whole and healthy, and I was happy about that. And spent a little bit of time in the service, started going to school. I wanted to get my degree and got the degree. And that took me into the forest products industry. My first job after I graduated, which was in 1971, was with Georgia Pacific. So this last December marked 50 years in the forest products industry of one way or the other. At that time, so that was my beginning into wood products, you might say.
And so the flying that you learned in the service, did you carry that on into civilian life?
No, not really. I think, like a lot of people, you get burned out on that. And I think I felt like when I was in Vietnam, I had that helicopter strapped to my back. There were some months I got over 150 hours, which doesn't sound like much, but when you go into the pre-flight, the post-flight, everything else, you're getting up at 3 or 4 in the morning, going on and out and checking your aircraft with a flashlight and taking off at dawn, and then you're coming back at dusk. And so they were long days, and they were 24/7. Sometimes because of our division, the 1st Air Cav was engaged all the time. There was no resting. So and they put us into the hottest areas that there were, and like I say, I managed to survive it, and I'm very blessed to have come out of it. But I didn't fly afterwards. I think at one point around 2000, year 2000, I started taking flying lessons, but my wife and I decided to buy a home instead. So rather than me going out and buying a small aircraft and doing all that, and punching holes in the clouds, we decided that maybe we'd have build a nice house and big lot and everything. So there went my piggy bank for my aircraft and flying.
When you say that you flew into the hottest zones, what does that mean?
Well, they were always engaged. You know, there wasn't a matter, I mean, not 24/7 in the sense that every time I went in, there was a firefight. But the CAV was always on the offensive. They were not a defensive. So they would be opening up if there was an area, generally where the Ho Chi Minh Trail came into Vietnam, they would go and build a fire base right in the middle of the thing. And so it's sort of like, hey, you guys are going to have to go around us because you're not coming through us. So you'd be flying in the equipment to clear the area. You'd be flying in the howitzers, flying in the ammunition, all the support that you had there so that they could build this fire base, so that they could interdict the North Vietnamese. And because basically we weren't fighting Viet Cong. It was all NVA regulars and just pouring into South Vietnam. And so the thing was we were going to stop them. And wherever they were coming in, we were going to stop them. Initially, we were up there in I Corps, which is up by the DMZ. And probably the last 8 or 9 months of my service over there, we were in War Zone D, which is north of Saigon, covering that area along there. In fact, after I came back, about 6 months later is when the CAV went in, made the incursion in Cambodia to clean out all the stuff that was across the border, because we knew it was all there. But once again, we were fighting. Well, the rules were we didn't cross the border until I think finally it was President Nixon decided to go in there and clean it out a little bit.
So when you transitioned from the military life into civilian life, what sort of support or things made the difference for you to help that to happen?
Well, I was fortunate probably versus a lot of the younger, personnel at that time. You know, the average age, I think, in Vietnam was 19 or under. When I was drafted, I was 23 years old. So I'd already been working in the civilian world, mainly in an office, marketing, or sales area for 6 years, maybe 7 years,
Right.
on and off, and trying to get my degree at night, going to school and all the rest of that. I couldn't afford to go full time, or they didn't have the scholarships like they have nowadays. You either had the money or you work someplace. And where I was originally from the Cleveland, Ohio area, and a lot of companies up there, they had a co-op. There were several colleges that were co-op. They were 5 years, and they would pay for your education while you worked for them. So that was a pretty good deal. I had worked for 2 companies that did that. And so it got me going. And I have a BA in business administration, management, marketing, which I had. That's what I finished up with here in Savannah. So, but I think for a lot of them, I remember whenever I was after I got out of OCS and we were an infantry division out in Fort Carson, the 5th Mechanized Division, we were training troops to go over to Vietnam, and later they put 1 or 2 brigades over there. And so I was out, I was a platoon leader initially. We got a captain or a new commanding officer, and he made me XO because I like being out playing in the field and camping out, come in on Monday, everybody saddles up, we were mechanized, and then we go out on maneuvers and live. Then we were training, I forget what they called that, but anyhow, we were preparing the troops to go to Vietnam. So we started with the squad, then it was the platoon, then it was the company, and these were live fire exercises. Like they do, you want to make sure you never have enough training. It's just the way it is. So one of the things that I learned, valuable lessons that I had in the service, but we were basically training the troops and preparing them for a deployment over to Vietnam. And then I got orders to go to flight school after about 6 months of doing that. But, and I think that a lot of the other young people that I saw, the everyday soldiers, They were neither prepared for the military or would I say that they were prepared for probably what was going to come later on. The training was good, but when you have a 18, 19, 17, well, I don't know if they were 17, I think they were 18, 19-year-olds that basically all of a sudden here he is in a uniform and you're teaching him rudiments like keeping your footlocker straight, making your bed. Now we're going to go on out here. We're going to the range. We're going to do this. They were going through some things in life that probably someone like myself that was 4 or 5 years older had already been through that. And they didn't have the maturity that someone that would be 21, 22, or 23. And I think that's why, a lot of veterans, especially the younger ones, that go into this and then they get out after 3 or 4 years, or they go into battle, they have issues afterwards, adjusting.
It sounds like you didn't have many of the challenges that others talk about when you transitioned into civilian life. Were there any persistent issues for yourself?
You mean like was that right? PTSD?
PTSD.
I guess it is. PST. Yeah. I get it backwards. Not really. I think the only thing is when I first came back from Vietnam. A dog would knock over trash cans and it sounded like incoming rounds hitting the runway, because we had a metal runway or something like that. And you wake up a cold sweat or something. And that, there were some flashes like that. But after that, I think most people that know me would say Ray Gaster is a driven person. I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to, while I was stationed here in Savannah at Hunter Army Airfield, I had a slot there with the Public Information Office, and then also was keeping up my flight time. And that's because I worked in marketing before, and I worked for a newspaper at one time, selling news, ads and such. So I got into the PIO and writing a little bit, and I started night school. So my main focus was, like, I haven't got time to screw around with anything, except I determined when I was going to get out, and then I was going to finish up full time, get my degree, and then I'm going to get into the job market. That's what my whole focus was on that. In Vietnam, I left that pretty much behind. You talk with other people, you compare war stories, but beyond that, it happened to be a stage in my life, and sort of like, hey, I got a lot of years in front of me. I can't relive the past. I'm a forward, future-looking guy, and that's what I tried to focus in on.
You seem to have a very clear purpose, direction, goal-focused, quite resilient. And do you think that having that type of personality enables you to make that transition into civilian life and move on and rebuild or redirect? Does it make it much easier, considering some of the things that people experience and those people that you were with experienced during their service?
Well, it's not easy, first of all. I think it comes down to your focus. And, bad things happen to good people all the time. And you just can't. And I've learned, in fact, I was probably harsh on things many. Now, I mean, over the years, I've learned that you've got to get on with your life. And once again, after it happens, sometimes there are things that you can do to correct it, but you have bad experiences. And I would say in Nam, they were experiences. As I said, I came back whole and in one piece. And to me, that was the most valuable thing that I got out of Vietnam. The experiences, you focused in on what you had to do more than what happened. Then afterwards, you might say you could do the after action report, or maybe after you come back after 12 months over there, you can start thinking about it and say, my God, I can't believe, some of the stuff that I went through, and we survived it. So, but once again, I keep history as history and try and learn my lessons from that. But I want to focus in on what do I need to be doing now? What's coming up tomorrow? What's next week? And what's that? Because we live for the future, and that's really where everything gets done, going forward.
So you're in a different industry than flying, obviously being in lumber and forestry. Are there skills that you learned in the military during your time that helped you in the industry that you're in now?
Absolutely. I can look back. I can take just the basic, being a junior officer and working with troops. The first thing is you've got to look after your men and your people. And I will look after my men and women that work for me. I mean, it's not that we're family. We're a company, we're employing them. But their daily task and what happens in their lives, when you hire them, you get all that other stuff comes with them, whether it's in the job description or not. So you got to have concern for them. And then, of course, you want to put them in a position where they can succeed. And so that's probably one of the biggest lessons that I learned in the service was the value of your people and doing everything you can to work with them. I know we have a reunion, our company does. And I remember the first time I went there, and this was mixed. It wasn't just the aviators, the warrants and the commissioned officers. There were a lot of door gunners and crew chief and everything else. It wasn't that many, I think less than 20 or 25 men, and now it's dwindled down to probably half of that. But in the discussions, I wasn't sure, about these. So we got into stuff. And of course, the thing that made me feel so good and made me want to go back is because I found that through the subordinates there, they really respected the way I treated them when we were in combat and when we were flying and looking out for them and the care that I took in flying the aircraft and other things. And so I got that from my infantry training. And there's no better challenge for personnel management than to lead a rifle platoon. All of a sudden, this is like nothing else that anybody could do in their lives, I don't think. Not in the business world. You're leading a rifle platoon, their lives and the actions of everybody depends on everybody. And you have got to build a homogeneous group and get them focused in on what your objective is and how we have to do it. The other big lesson that I learned over there, as I said initially, I was sort of a truck driver in the sky, and I still laugh about that. But we're a lumber company, but you know what? We're really in the logistics business. I have like 18 or 20 vehicles. Very little material gets picked up. Most of this stuff gets delivered. I learned a lot about logistics and moving stuff and the things that go wrong and everything. And that came from going through things that turn out to be crap shows, and you're just wondering, well, how are we going to get this thing going? And that's both as when we would do field maneuvers and with vehicles and equipment out in Fort Carson, you had rain and mud, and then sometimes you just wonder. It isn't the Army that's testing me. I think it's the weather and it's God Himself that's testing us and to make sure that we know what we're doing and we're going to get it right. And I think that, in fact, I know that later on in my business, and as it's evolved and everything, it's all based down on our ability to deliver goods to job sites and to get it right, and which is very important. So. We just happen to be selling a commodity that's lumber. Some of my employees look at me and they scratch their head and think, does the old man know what he's talking about? So, but I think I do. So I try and boil it down to the simplest, you might say, the simplest common denominator there. And then if we can take care of those, we can grow into the more complicated tasks.
Ray, from what you've been saying, it sounds like the way that you enter into the military makes a big difference on how you can exit. And some people have different experiences in there as well. You were in war, which may be very different than people that sign up in peacetime and they may be deployed to different bases and they serve, but don't see a deployment in a war zone. And so the context, I guess, makes a real difference. How you enter makes a difference. What would you say to people if there was some advice you could give people who are transitioning, regardless of the background, the context, and everything? What are some principles or some practices, something they could put in place to prepare themselves to transition well into civilian life?
Well, I think the first thing I would say is that you need to be thinking, looking forward, thinking about what you want to do, come up with. If you don't have a plan, set an objective. And remember, once you're out of the military, you're out of the military. I think that I see a problem at times when people are getting ready to be discharged. The military, it's almost like they want to, well, they ask you, have you had any injuries? Have you had anything else? And they build up this thing like, well, you're going to get money for it. Did you ever fall down? Or did you hit down and maybe fracture your leg, or you have something else? And everybody's looking for a disability. I won't say everybody, but a lot of people were looking for disabilities. And I've hired, and I have a preference for hiring military people. And I've had a few times where I've had some of these guys, and you're talking about going to their support group. And I think I've talked several of them out of doing that and just saying, stand on your own. Come on, you have it. Don't become dependent upon your past. When you hook up there, I think making a clean break and then getting on with it. Take the experience that you've learned, the good and the bad. The bad stuff. You learn that if you're in a position of authority, then you could change maybe the rules of the game a little bit. The good stuff, you want to add to that and build up your skills from that. The military is great for what it does. It goes in, it breaks things, it destroys things, it protects our country or destroys our enemy. That's what it's supposed to do. Excuse me. So if you're in strictly a peacetime and you're at a desk or you're out there in the motor pool and all you do is work on vehicles, increase your skill set so that you have value whenever you get out and you want to go get a job. So the more you can learn on Uncle Sam's dime, the better off you are. So
that's right.
Yeah. So that use it to your advantage. And even though you may say there's Mickey Mouse BS that you've got to put up with, all this other crap at times, learn to overcome that, because at some point in time, you're going to be out there on your own. No one's going to be coming in there and tell you, you got to make your bed, you got to do this, you got to do that, or anything else. So develop your own skill set so you're ahead of the game. And I think that I've seen some of, right now you have a lot of people getting on out and say, well, what's my skill set? Well, one of the reasons, in fact, I've had other business people ask me, well, why should I hire somebody in the military? I said, well, first of all, they've done something for 2 to 3 years, probably 3 years or more, consistently. They've worked for a company. So they've had some stability. The next thing is they know how to get dressed every day, brush their teeth, get themselves cleaned up, and do things. So they've been in a repetitive thing, and probably so when you ask them to come to work, now we have shirts to wear, like in our company, it has our name on it. I don't want to see, I don't want to see the Atlanta Braves or the Atlanta Falcons or Jacksonville Jaguars shirts on any of my employees when they're on the clock. They understand that, we're the brand. And I use the example when we have an introduction meeting. I said, if you saw someone getting out of a truck wearing a brown shirt and slacks, what company they work for? They say, oh, UPS. So I say, well, yeah. So, so that's why hiring a military person, they understand if you're trying to build a brand and you're trying to get some uniformity and where it's cohesive group of people working for you, the military develops that in them. Now, some people rebel and they might fight it all the time, and and then they get pushed out of the service. But those that learn to accept it for what it's worth and use it for learning experience, they're way ahead of the game. And I've seen a lot of veterans, like myself, where they've gone on out, and they've become entrepreneurial, start their own business, or go to work for somebody and become the hard charger and the leader within that company in a short period of time. And it's a lot of times because of the skill sets that they picked up. They turned it around to their advantage.
Ray, thank you very much for sharing, your time in the military and what you're doing now, and also your insights. Some of the things that I wrote down is that bad things just happen to good people sometimes, but setting an objective can really make the difference. Right. Don't be dependent on your past, and also take the opportunity to increase your skill sets and learn so that you can be of value when you exit.
Right.
Does that sum that up well?
I believe so. Yes, sir.
Ray, thank you very much for your time. Appreciate you sharing your story, and would like to have you back later on as our series develops and we have more guests, and I'd love to have you on in the future when we have maybe a couple of veterans together to discuss experiences, if that's okay with you.
Well, yes, I would be thrilled to come back. This has been enjoyable to talk about a little bit about my military experience, but then also maybe get the point across that that experience, you can use it to your advantage as a veteran, and that's so important. Rather than a liability, it's an advantage. Trust me, it's an advantage.
Well, thank you, Ray. Go well. And for everybody watching, with the show notes directly underneath YouTube or on LinkedIn or wherever you see this recording, you'll see there's the LinkedIn link to catch hold of Ray and to communicate with him or connect with him. It's there for you. And also, if you are a veteran, our courses at the University of Applied Research and Development are VA funded, and you can access them. And we do have courses that run shorter, enabling you to get your bachelor degree or your master's degree quicker, because we recognize your service and the skills that you've learned when you've been in the military as well. So we look forward to seeing you again on another Veteran Stories.